I sure am. Audio, audio, checking, checking, checking.
provide your vote. The chair will call for any comments or questions after an item has been presented. Thank you. Chair Norby?
All right, thank you, Reagan. And we will move on. Ms. Kendall, for the first item, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Norby and members of the committee. Gina Kendall, Principal Project Engineer, for the record. The first item on the agenda is to conduct your first citizen participation period. As you know, on March 22nd, 2020, the State of Nevada Executive Department issued Declaration of Emergency Directive 006, which suspended the requirement to have a physical location for public meetings. Pursuant to Directive 006, and for the health and safety of the community, this meeting is being held telephonically. To allow for public participation, RTC is accepting public comments via email at publiccomments@rtc.com. Comments can be submitted to be read aloud or to be added directly to the written record. Mrs. Reagan Lively will read the public comments received by the RTC.
Thank you, Gina. Chair Joseph Norby, for the record, this is the first time set aside for public comment. This time is limited to comments on items included on the agenda. Comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining words being included in the written record. Do we have any comments?
Thank you, Chair Norby. Reagan Lively, again for the record. There are no public comments at this time. Chair Norby, that concludes the public comments received.
Thank you, Reagan. Moving on, Ms. Kendall. Item number 2.
All right, thank you. Item 2 is to approve the minutes. The minutes are in order and ready for approval.
Are there any comments or questions from the subcommittee regarding the meeting minutes from the March 16th, 2021 meeting? If there are no comments or questions, do we have a motion to approve?
Jim Keene, Boulder City. I'll move to approve.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. The motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the next item.
Thank you. Item 3 is to receive a presentation from INRIX on the U.S. Traffic Signal Scorecard, and features of the Regional Integrated Transportation Information System, I think it's called RITIS platform. We have Mr. Gary Carlin from INRIX present today to provide us a presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Kendall, Chairman Norby, and members of the Operations Committee. My name is Gary Carlin. I am the Director of Public Services, Public Sector Services for INRIX, covering the southwest portion of the United States. I'm here today to talk to you about INRIX Signal Analytics and provide an overview as was previously noted. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go over quickly foundational data that we used as part of this, talk about the scorecard itself, and then talk about the Signal Analytics platform that is being used to devise a scorecard and how that can be used for overall signal operations. And then I'll talk briefly about some references. Next slide, please. So one of the key things that have made the advent of this new product possible is a dramatic increase in our data. Oops, can you back up one? Thank you. Between 2019 and 2020, we increased our data by approximately 10x, and we are now collecting well over 100 million trips a day. Is that auto advancing? I apologize if it is. Next slide, please. To put that in proportion, we evaluate this against FHWA's national VMT reporting that they release every month, and we range anywhere from 7 to the low 20% as far as overall VMT. And as you can see, right now we're probably in the 8 to 10% range in the state and in the greater Vegas area. Next slide, please. So as agencies work to realize the benefits of applying automated traffic signal performance measures, many are being constrained by the need for significant detection and communication systems that have been required to collect necessary field data for these systems. So part of what we're here to talk about today is the advent of what we were referring to as virtual infrastructure and the utilization of these data sources that allows the addition to, or in some cases, replacement of standard or historically based field-based data collection methodologies. Some advantages to these systems is that they do not require any field data collection. They are highly scalable. They can be quickly deployed, and they also have some softer benefits, such as a reduction in the need for field visits, with implications obviously for employee safety, not having to put people inside the right-of-way. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to move on to a brief discussion of our U.S. Signals Scorecard that was released in February of this year. Next slide, please. There were 4 main steps, but the main takeaway I would like you to see from this slide is that this process and the scorecard required no field infrastructure and no signal timing data. Next slide, please. So the first step was to ingest a huge quantity of high-quality GPS data. This data is special in that it has a drop rate of every 5 seconds or less, meaning that there is a waypoint provided as a vehicle traverses the network every 3 to 5 seconds. We selected 1 week, which we felt at that point was quote-unquote normal, new normal being, a daily changing thing that we're looking at. But essentially, we selected the 2nd week of October 2020, and we evaluated about 11 billion daily GPS readings. Next slide, please. We took those GPS readings and we translated those into what we refer to as trip paths. So this is essentially an anonymized route of individual vehicles through the roadway network. And during that week, we were able to curate basically 225 million trips covering 2.2 billion miles of travel across the United States. Next slide, please. From there, we were able to generate a wide variety of signal performance metrics. This included, but was not limited to, things such as day and timestamp, turning movements, stops, travel time, and travel speed through the intersection. The original scorecard covered approximately 210,000 signalized intersections in the United States, and we have since added about another 40 to 50,000 more, and we're about to add another tranche, which should bring us close to 300,000 signals total covered in the United States. Next slide, please. In its current incarnation, signal performance now provides a wide variety of metrics. These include things such as percentage of arrival on green, vehicle count and stop vehicle count, average and maximum travel times, average and maximum travel speeds, control delay, both average and maximum, which then allows us to derive highway capacity manual level of service for each of the intersections, and finally, split failures for each of the intersections and approaches. Next slide, please. The 3 that are shown in start were used in the report, by the way. Sorry about that, Reagan. Thank you. So embedded in the actual scorecard, there is a page for each state, and there's a hyperlink at the end of this presentation that'll take you to the scorecard. And so there's one for the state, and then there's also a breakout by county, as well as the top 10 intersections by total delay. JP was kind enough to point out to me previously that there was a lot of construction going on during the time period we picked, ironically enough. But nonetheless, I think what you'll see is that you do have quite a large number of signals in and around the strip that obviously have quite a lot of delay associated with them on a regular basis. Next slide, please. There's also a live map viewer, which there's a hyperlink as well to this at the end of the presentation, which allows you to zoom around the entire state as well as the greater Vegas area. And at this time, we already have over 2,800 traffic signals that have been added inside of Clark County, and we are in the process of adding additional signals, as I had previously mentioned. This will also show you the level of service that was derived from the scorecard, as well as some other additional metadata for each of the intersections that are covered. Next slide, please. If you hit the next slide, I think it advances one more. Perfect, thank you. I did want to point out, we also evaluated counties and MPOs throughout the country, and likely due to the proliferation of high-density downtown areas with an unusual configuration of intersections that include a lot of triple Fs that are pretty unique, RTC ended up being at the top of the list during the scorecard evaluation. Next slide, please. So that's an overview of the scorecard itself, and that was the basis, for the scorecard, rather, excuse me, is our signal analytics platform. And as I mentioned, this is based 100% on GPS data with no field infrastructure required. Next slide, please. So it consists of two primary modules. One is the signal analytics reporting that will be coming from INRIX, and the other is part of the RIDIS RIDIS CATT lab provided tool sets that is available through our partnership with the University of Maryland. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The first part of it will be automated dashboard reporting that will be sent directly to subscribers to the service. Next slide, please. You can just toggle through these, Reagan, there's 2 or 3 until we actually get to the next slide. Thank you. In the interest of time, I'm going to move this along. Thank you. So if you click one more time. So the way the reporting will work, the dashboard reporting will work, is that in the upper left-hand corner, it will provide you an overview of the entire system. In this case, this is live data actually from the City of Austin deployment. Next slide, please. It will also provide you average control delay per vehicle for all the covered intersections. Next slide, please. And from there, a breakout of the level of service categories by intersection. Next click. Thank you. And then it will also show you, for the area covered, the top 5 intersections that have improved or worsened, as well as the top 3 corridors, excuse me, that have improved or deteriorated. Next slide, please. So the dashboard that will be sent out will provide an overall system summary. This will be a hyperlink document that will be clickable and will have the ability to drill into additional data. And it will definitely include things such as control delay, average delay per vehicle, some overall system performance measures by intersection, and a summary of top intersections and top corridors. Next slide, please. The data will be presented for each intersection on an approach as well as a movement level basis, and will include things such as delay per vehicle, observed number of vehicles, and arrivals on green for each of the intersections that are covered. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a system-wide map view, again, focusing on Austin, which is our currently live city. We're in process with 10 other public sector agencies throughout the United States, but Austin is the first one to go live. Next slide, please. So as we zoom in, if you click one more time, Reagan, what you'll see is the map is currently showing you a 24-hour display, and if you click one more time, you'll see that there are a number of different time periods that can be configured and selected from. The agency will have the opportunity to select up to 9 different time periods as part of the setup process. Next slide, please. There's also the ability to change what the map is actually showing. So in this case, we're looking at level of service or control delay. If you click again, you'll see that you can also evaluate control delay, percentage of arrival on green, or split failures. Next slide, please. So in addition to the map format, there's the ability to display all the information in the tabular format. Next slide, please. One more, sorry. And from here, you can see all of the metrics that actually went into developing the map interface. And as you may notice, excuse me, on the left-hand side, there are radio buttons that can be selected to evaluate individual intersections. Next slide, please. So as an example, we've zoomed in here at one particular intersection, at the intersection of Congress and Cesar Chavez, which is a major intersection in downtown Austin. And what you'll see in the lower right-hand corner is there's a depiction that shows you the various movements, including the delay by movement, as well as the overall total number of vehicles. You'll see below that you do have the ability to change the metric that is being displayed, and you can also display the observed or scaled counts. So you can actually scale the counts up, and I'll discuss that shortly. Next slide, please. In addition to showing you the various movement data, we will also show you arrival on green, stop count, and split failures. And slightly above that, you'll see we're also providing you rolling 4-week averages against the current time period that's being evaluated. Next slide, please. If you're familiar with signal operations, you're probably aware of all the wonderful work that's been done by Purdue University. We've taken part of their previous work and we've incorporated the Purdue cumulative density function or distribution. And essentially what this is a single metric that allows you to evaluate overall intersection operations. And again, it will be plotted for the current period versus a 4-week rolling average. And it will also show you travel times and average control delays for that period. Next slide, please. There will also be a set of corridor level reports that will be based on corridors that have been defined by the agency and are directional. So since signals are typically timed in a directional manner for platooning and flow purposes, the corridors will be defined in a similar manner. Next slide, please. So in addition to some of the previous metrics we've talked about, the corridor level metrics will also include travel time index and planning time index, which are 2 keys, typically to evaluating overall systems operation. And again, you will see that there's a cumulative density function at the bottom showing you how the overall corridor is operating. Also planned but not currently available, we will be showing you actual vehicle trajectories through the intersection based on the GPS data. Next slide, please. Finally, we know that engineers being engineers, no matter how many reports or modules we create, there's always going to be need for some additional functionality, and so we have created the ability to run custom reports. Next slide, please. So by clicking the embedded hyperlink button, next slide, please, it will take you directly to the INRIX tools that are powered by the CATT lab at University of Maryland. Next slide, please. Once you are inside of INRIX's toolset, you have the ability to select an individual roadway or to draw a polygon on a map and select a group of intersections. Next slide, please. This will then bring up a secondary view where you can then also determine what time period you'd like to evaluate, what days of the week, and what peak periods you would like to evaluate. Next slide, please. The same metrics that were shown in the daily dashboard report will also be available embedded inside of the Signal Analytics platform. And there will be a host of other information available as well, including a geographical depiction of the intersection and movement in question, as well as a stick figure diagram of the intersection showing all the movements and the measure of effectiveness or metric that was selected for display. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to run you through very quickly is a quick example of how you could use this. And this is a study of the impact of COVID on this particular intersection. So we're going to compare the first 2 weeks of February and April of 2020 against the first 2 weeks of January of 2021. Next slide, please. And tell you what, if you could just click through about the next 3, Reagan, just to get to the summary results. Yeah, there you go, perfect. Essentially, what we started off with was about 48 seconds of overall average control delay for the eastbound through movement before COVID. During travel restrictions, that dropped down to about 28 seconds. And by January, as some of these restrictions were lifted, it was back up to about 30 seconds. Next slide, please. If you can click a couple more, there you go, perfect. Oop, well, back up one, I'm sorry. You had the right idea. In a similar vein, we could look at split failures. So beforehand, there was 131 split failures, and if you're familiar with downtown Austin, this is one of the gateways to where all the restaurants and music venues are, so that's not really surprising. During COVID, that dropped to 1, and by January, it was back up to about 62, or about halfway of what it used to be. Next slide, please. There will also be some other plots that will be embedded as downloadable links, and these will include things such as the top worst 20 intersections by percentage of arrival on green, or control delay. There will also be the option to download figures that will show you volumes for the intersections for overall evaluation purposes. Next slide, please. This slide is an overall summary of the Signals Scorecard, Signal Analytics, and some of the references that were used for both of those services, products, and documentation. There's also a hyperlink in here, as I mentioned, for the interactive map, as well as the ability to download the scorecard. Next slide, please. So I wanted to run through all that really quickly in the interest of time. I would point out right now that in addition to Austin, the city of Austin being live with about 250 signals, we have another 8 or 9 agencies currently in process of signing up, including Rhode Island DOT, which is going to be a statewide deployment of over 700 signals, PennDOT, New York City DOT, North Carolina DOT, Maryland DOT, Caltrans, and Washington County, Houston Metro, and Washington State DOT. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and I'd like to open up for any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you, Gary, for your presentation. INRIX has really come a long way since I remember seeing it several years ago, so appreciate the refresher and all the work that you guys are doing there. Are there any comments or questions from the subcommittee? I'll open up the floor for a moment here.
Mr. Chairman, John Anuelis with the RTC. If the committee has no questions, I had a couple.
Go ahead, JP. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, thanks a lot, Gary. Mind-blowing stuff. I am still, well, I still don't quite understand what we have access to and the relationship between INRIX and the dashboard and RIDIS, getting into the real nitty-gritties and that type of thing. I know that we have a license. We piggyback on NDOT's license for INRIX, and our planning team uses that for the congestion mitigation process report that they have to do for the feds. But I don't think that includes the signal analytics package that comes within the INRIX platform, and I don't think it includes direct access into RIDIS. Can you help me understand how all these things fit together and how the agencies could get access so they can run their own analysis on their own signals, and then the RTC could also take on that challenge, you know, from a more regional perspective?
Sure thing, JP. So let's kind of start off with what you have. So right now we have a contract with NDOT for probe data analytics, which is a sister product but different from signal analytics, and that's what your planning folks are using for CMAQ as well as some other studies.
Okay.
So that's what you currently have access to. The DOT basically had a statewide license which allows any public sector agency inside the state boundaries access, as well as their consultants and even academia. So students.
So what did you call it again?
Probe data analytics, or
Probe data analytics. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So that is one product. Signal analytics is a brand new product that unfortunately the DOT hasn't signed up for yet, although I am bugging Rodney Schilling about it.
Good.
Yeah, but essentially it could be signed up for an individual city basis or a regional basis with RTC or a statewide basis. And similar to the way PDA works, if for the sake of argument, the DOT went for a statewide license, then there would be the ability for agencies beneath them, so to speak, to sign up. The difference is it is done on an individual signal basis, so the signals actually get designated as part of what is included or not included in the system. Does that address your question, JP?
Right, and then that signal analytics module package, that the engine that drives those reports is RIDIS. Or do we get access to RIDIS directly so we can run our own customized reports? The dashboard that you showed with the canned reports and then RIDIS and doing our own thing, I'm still a little foggy on that relationship.
Sure, it is a little confusing. So RIDIS is, I'm trying to think how to put this. RIDIS is kind of like the kitchen sink, right? It is developed by UMD and it can incorporate an unbelievable amount of data, and depending on what's available in any given state. Probe data analytics is part of RIDIS. It's a very small part of overall RIDIS. Signal analytics is also part of RIDIS, but it's a separate, distinct part of it. Signal analytics, as it's being offered, is a combination package between INRIX, so we are partnered with UMD in this. So if you sign up for Signal Analytics, you get both dashboards as well as access to the Signal Analytics tool sets available through UMD's RIDIS.
That is very helpful. You get both, is what I just heard. If
Sorry?
you sign up for the Signal Analytics package.
You get both, yeah. It's two
Yeah.
modules, and you get both of them. So you would get daily reporting to whoever signs up for. It's based on emails. Anybody can sign up for it once the agency signs up for the service. So those emails will come in every day, and then you have the ability to separately go into Redis or to go through the reports via the hyperlink.
Great. Now, a question about the report itself and the scorecard itself and Las Vegas. Obviously, nobody likes to be on the top of let's just say the bad list. And, you know, we were, depending on the metric, we were pretty consistently, we meaning Clark County, Southern Nevada, we're on the top of that list in a lot of different categories. The week that you picked is like any representative week in Southern Nevada, lots of construction, lots of stuff going on. So I don't think picking this one week necessarily introduced any particular bias. I think you would have had probably pretty much the same result any week you picked here. But other agencies, I'm assuming, had a similar reaction to the report. Can you talk about some of the things that you have identified as biases? I mean, when I saw the original report, you know, you guys kind of just threw out there that you looked at this in one particular way. You are not claiming that this is the only way to look at signals. The message I took out of it is that you have a lot of metrics, and agencies can decide on which metrics are most appropriate for them. The presenter said, you know, you guys just were calling the balls and strikes, and you can argue on what defines a ball and what defines a strike. You just called them the way you saw it, created the list, and then threw it out there for people to tear it apart. What was the reaction in other parts of the country to this methodology, and how can it be improved? Well, number one, am I off base in that assessment that there are lots of different ways to skin this cat, and you're not saying that yours is the only way? Let's start with that.
Yeah, absolutely correct, JP. And I guess first off, let's just say it was pretty much more or less a random week we selected. It wasn't, since we were looking at this from a national level, we didn't look at any one area when we picked the week. We just decided on a week based on what we saw as overall national trends for volume data. The other caveat in this is it looks at signals from a daily basis. So some people, some other agency operators said, well, obviously we don't typically run signals on a daily basis. It's done on a peak period. So the two-edged sword in that one, obviously, is it will make some areas look better and some areas look worse, because peak periods obviously can be dramatically different than an overall average daily assessment. You're absolutely right. There are many different ways to evaluate signals. So these signals were evaluated essentially as, for the purposes of this particular study, as independent signals. In reality, and this is what the corridor analytics tools get to, in reality, most agencies operate many, if not most, of their signals in a coordinated system. There will be some outliers, obviously, where they're isolated, but many of the signals will be operated in a coordinated system. And so different metrics then apply to those signals, right? So you're looking at how does the overall corridor operate as opposed to how does an individual intersection operate. Is that I'm trying to think if I missed any of your other questions. Apologize.
Well, no, I kind of rambled on there, but yes, that does answer the question. And so, like vehicle per delay, or vehicle or delay per vehicle, you know, that is a metric. Control delay, that's a metric, you know, associated with an intersection. So you could theoretically have high vehicle delay per intersection, but at the same time have pretty good progression down the corridor.
You could, to a certain point, yes.
Right, to a certain point.
Control delay is kind of, well, it's one of the holy grails developed through the MUTCD as far as the signal warrants. So we kind of followed national, I'll say, standards, protocols, and processes. And control delay is currently one of the major methodologies to evaluate signal operations, and it gives us the old A, B, C, D, E, F
Sure.
scoring. But yes, to your point, that is just one factor that is looked at within an overall systems operation approach.
Okay, so that if an agency wanted to do more of a corridor analysis, they've got the tools to do that. And that was not necessarily beyond the scope of the scorecard, but it wasn't really the focus of the scorecard. You were looking at individual intersections.
Yes, sir. Exactly correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, JP. Any other comments or questions from the subcommittee? If not, I've just got one quick question for you, Gary. Joe Norby for the record. It's have you guys looked at partnering or starting to look at partnering or partnered with any traffic signal systems to integrate this into traffic signal system dashboards and analytics from the back engine house of like a TMC?
Short answer is yes. Part of it has been trying to figure it out. So we have been talking on and off for well over a year with Econolite, who is one of the biggest providers of signal operations equipment. I think they have, at least according to their marketing paper, they have something like 100,000 of the signals in the United States use Econolite products. We've also talked to Intellite and a couple other of the vendors. Part of it is, I think, and several of them are already working on this, but part of it is they've already developed how they want to integrate field data collection devices, but they hadn't necessarily decided when they were developing those to incorporate GPS data, because candidly, in their defense, the data wasn't good enough a year or two ago to do this. It's only the advent of having the very high temporal granularity data that it's allowing this type of an assessment. Does that answer your question, sir?
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Sure.
One last shot here. Any other questions before we move on to the next item? All right. There's no more additional questions. Let's move on. Ms. Kendall, item 4.
Thank you, Mr. Norby. Item 4 is to receive a presentation from Boulder Artificial Intelligence, Boulder AI, on the Boulder AI camera technology capabilities. Here we have Mr. Darren Odom from Boulder AI to present.
Thanks, Reagan. Yeah, my name is Darren Odom. I'm the founder and CTO of Boulder AI. I want to sincerely thank the members of the committee and the RTC for the opportunity to present this solution on pedestrian safety. Although our company is from Boulder, Colorado, I'm sitting here at the north part of the famous Strip in a beautiful, sunny Las Vegas, Nevada. And having had a chance to walk around your beautiful city, we've seen some of the challenges that we're used to addressing in many different cities. But obviously, every city has its unique challenges. We have a limited amount of time and a lot of slides, so I'm going to fly through these. But if you wouldn't mind, Reagan, next slide. Thank you. So Boulder AI is a pedestrian safety company. We use artificial intelligence to look at intersections and inform safety systems in real time. So our big differentiator is being able to process really video information from existing cameras or new cameras, and the data that we generate is freely available to other systems to create safe and efficient intersections. Next slide. So there's a bunch of problems that we can solve if you look at this list, but the biggest differentiator is the data that we generate. Because it's in real time, it can be sent directly to the traffic controller, and we work with Intellite, Econolite, and others, where we help those traffic controllers make decisions. And it also, at the same time, creates a digital twin of all the moving objects in GPS or GIS space. So it's a common positional language that is compatible with a lot of different systems. We do this at about 10 times per second. What this means is that it's future-proof for connected vehicles, and we're currently working, with the infrastructure companies that are creating connectivity to those connected vehicles to inform, eventually self-driving vehicles of pedestrian presence and really situational awareness very, very quickly. But as a byproduct, you have all this information that you need to improve upon the intersection over time. So you have counts, speeds, utilization data, lane occupancy data, safety index, and near miss information. Next slide. So our devices can build on top of existing intersection cameras, or in new applications, we can provide state-of-the-art, easy-to-install sensors. And we say cameras as sensors because we don't need to transmit any images. We are actually using AI to extract data, not pictures. Next slide. You can skip this one. So although the data is always property of our customers, the cities, we provide a way to direct data flow and visualize that information at the cloud level. So all of our devices are cloud configurable, which means less truck rolls to go and configure or check in on the status of a sensor. The big picture here is that we generate open, shareable GIS data that can be ingested into many other systems that are also cloud native. And all of this data is available through two types of APIs, or application program interfaces. Really, these are the pipes that connect multiple types of cloud native services together. The one is real time, so that's a streaming API, and that's a lot of our power is streaming real time data. But the other is a query based API for reporting and aggregating multiple queries. Next slide. The solution is constantly improving and configurable to unique challenges of each intersection. So we focus on particular data points and then send that data to signal controllers, data APIs, and even local roadside units. Next slide. Once the data is gathered, it's available to connect to other systems. So planning, operations, and now that you have the data, it isn't necessary to pay for the same traffic studies over and over again. Next. We focus on the vulnerable road users, or VRUs. The ability to light signage when pedestrians are taking longer than expected to cross. The power of our approach allows us to add and improve quickly. So we have an infrastructure in place that allows us to improve the models or the artificial intelligence that's running out inside of our devices. So we're currently adding wheelchairs, mobility scooters, and to allow for additional measures as necessary. Next slide. Here's a use case that's outside of the intersection, but just as important. This connects to a sensor, our sensor, to a flashing signal that allows pedestrians to cross in that mid-block section. You've seen these, flashing lights. Typically, the ped has to push a button, or there's a crossing guard there, to assist with the crossing. Again, with the ability to improve, we can add differentiation between the crossing guard and everyone else that's just crossing. This is operational data to determine if the guard is present, and we can measure near miss and safety index to determine the efficacy while a guard is present. Next slide. This is a real situation in Denver, Colorado, where we have installed our devices at several critical intersections. This is actually in the middle of the night. Our person is here seen crossing, person 3 there is crossing the street against the signal. And at the instant we detect that pedestrian, our device speaks directly to the signal controller. Using this protocol called NTCIP 1202, we not only inform that local controller, but we also get the the signal phase and timing information, and all of that information collaborated up to the cloud. And in this case, we record the near miss event, and we can scrub it for personally identifiable information for GDPR compliance and so forth. At this intersection, though, we're installing a flashing blank out sign to light up when PEDs are in the intersection when the opposite phase is green. So our device records all this data in real time, but also has the ability within milliseconds to turn the sign on and hopefully save some lives. Next slide. This is just another example of a near miss that's reconstructed using no video at all. So we actually just use the backdrop of the scene and the satellite view, and we reconstruct this using only the metadata extracted from the scene. Next slide. I think we can skip this one. This is an example of an exploration of near miss events by severity. A near miss is defined as the time before two objects collide, and we can explore this data in a number of different ways, and this is an example of that. The main point is that once this data is generated, there are a plethora of ways to visualize it and interpret it. Next slide. So Safety Index is another general report. You can get a quick overview of weeks worth of data in one dashboard or alerts in real time when safety is becoming an issue. Next. Here's another installation in Denver, Colorado. We're actually pressing the call button for pedestrians automatically. And then the city plans to extend or recall the PED phase depending on if real-time presence of pedestrians is relevant or not. Next. In cases where no PEDs are present, keep the traffic moving and improve traffic without compromising safety. Once you have the data, it's yours. So again, generate reports without having to pay over and over again for costly studies. Count people, vehicles, bikes, freight, buses by lane, turning movement counts, speeds, and time to cross, and many, many others. Next. In partnership with SiteHound, which is a company that makes probably the most accurate make, model, year, color for each vehicle, and automatic license plate recognition. So this is just once we have the data, we can extract even more data if necessary. We can skip to the next one. And next, yeah. Back one, sorry about that. Pedestrians should not be required to press a button, but also should not disrupt the flow of traffic if they're not present. So automation of PED crossing is key, and we speak directly to that traffic controller to inform it of these situations. And then on the next slide, I'd like to, at this point, we can skip over the next few slides because a lot of detail is present here. Maybe just go to the back, the last slide, for some Q&A. PED safety is a really difficult problem to solve, but hyperlocal, real-time data that connects to the traffic system is a way to help. And again, I want to thank the RTC for this opportunity to present our solution for pedestrian safety. And here's our contact information if you'd like to get in touch with us. You can open it up to any questions at this point.
All right, Darren, thank you very much for your presentation. I know we kind of flew through there, but we'll open it up to the committee. Again, just Chair Norby for the record. Open it up to the panel here for any questions or comments. Hearing no questions, I just have a quick question. This is something that recently came up within our jurisdiction. Again, Joe Norby for the record. How at a traffic signalized intersection, if we're going button free, detecting pedestrians, how do you know, or how does the system know which direction that pedestrian is going to cross? Obviously, knowing that there's two different phases at each corner that the buttons control, is there information within the analytics that kind of tracks trends and movements, or is it an educated guess?
That's a really, really good question. It's a super hard problem to solve for. We do have the trajectory of the pedestrian as they approach the intersection. So we have the whole history, but that's not to say that someone's going to make a hard left when they arrive at the intersection. So it's the companies that claim to be able to do that it's pretty suspect, because you can't predict where someone's going to go. But that said, we do have multiple zones that we can configure at the pedestrian landing zone, and there's typically people will typically they'll kind of face the direction that they want to go, and you can draw bounding boxes around those areas to try and inform the traffic controller. But in reality, there's really just no way to predict where people are intending to go.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee?
Hey, Joe, this is John Penuelos again with the RTC.
Go ahead, JP.
Yeah, I wanted to give the committee ample time there before I jumped in and hogged all the time. So Darren, thanks for coming in, first of all. Just absolutely fascinating. Could you talk a little bit about, Denver? I know you mentioned, you showed us a couple examples of it. Could you just briefly kind of maybe go through the scope, what Denver was looking at in particular? Joe's question about, predicting where the PED's going to go. That's a great question. I mean, I'm sure Denver had the similar question. What are the types of things that Denver is trying to get their heads around with your help?
Yeah, I would say there's about 5 or 6 different use cases that they've chosen to solve for. First and foremost is the ATC MTD grant, the federal grant for pedestrian and connected PED. That is a couple of different use cases. One is the mid-block crossing, where we see the flashing lights. So that has about 20 different installs in the city of Denver now, which is also getting traffic movement and counts information, so they can inform those crossings. It also lights up signage at those mid-block crossings automatically. And then at the intersection level, there's a few different use cases that they're after. One is a blank out sign for a large one-way that cars are crossing when pedestrians are also trying to cross, and that's a hyper local, hyper relevant use case, because at that particular intersection, at least 5 or 6 people this year have been hit by cars. So it's we hope to install that blank out sign in the next couple of weeks or so. The others are also relevant to large crowds. So one of them is at the Pepsi Center. It's about 6 different cameras that are looking for crowd crossings. So it's actually impossible for humans to be able to count individual people, in large crowds. This actually uses a different model and puts the controllers into recall as large crowds, cross against the signal. And it's not even trying to predict that people are waiting to cross. It's just that a large crowd is crossing and turn all the lights red.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's another. That's typically something that's done by the police, manually, but that's being automated now. As soon as crowds become relevant again, that use case will be relevant. Hopefully, we'll get out of COVID here soon. The other use cases are automated data collection. So, not having to pay for studies over and over again, and really just having that data at their enterprise data management system is really important. Because in Colorado, there's something called Dr. Cog, which is has created an enterprise data management system, which all the different cities put data into. So as you probably know, it's difficult to get that level of sharing going. So that's a starting point.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I just wanted to go through that to maybe get some ideas buzzing around in the heads of the audience and the subcommittee members on potential for uses in the individual cities. Obviously the RTC as the the operators of the signals, the idea that you can get the PEDs, give the PEDs the time that they need to safely get across an intersection, while at the same time not giving them the time they need when they're not there. You can balance those two competing needs. And you're not locked in necessarily, at least theoretically, to assumptions that are in the manual that are based on averages as far as crossing times and minimum standards that engineers have to build into their systems to maintain a level of adherence to those standards and guidance, but might not work for any particular individual. 3.5 feet per second is pretty quick if you're in some sort of a mobility device, or if you are in an old-fashioned, step walker. So the idea that you could extend time in those situations while giving all the time necessary to move cars while that's not needed is just really appealing to the RTC, and I'm sure the agencies as well. So would you be available to discuss any of these concepts in person with the agencies, or if there's interest there? You mentioned kind of in passing the use case for crossing guards, school crosswalks, that kind of thing. That's something that the RTC doesn't really get involved in, but I know all the agencies have safe route to school programs. So if an agency wanted to talk specific use cases, I'm sure you could be available for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thought leaders at the city of Denver have also offered up their time if there are any questions directly, traffic engineer to traffic engineer.
Yeah, that would be great. So we'll take you up on that. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, JP, and thanks, Mr. Odom. We appreciate your time this afternoon. Just one last try. We'll get out there. Any additional questions from the committee before we move on? All right, hearing none. Ms. Kendall, we'll move on to item 5.
Sorry about that. Trouble unmuting. Thank you, Mr. Norby. So our next item is item 5, is to receive a presentation and share input on our sidewalk accessibility in construction zones. Ms. Deb Reardon is here to present.
Thanks so much, Gina, and good afternoon to the committee members. For the record, I'm Deb Reardon, a principal transportation planner with the RTC's Metropolitan Planning Organization. And today I'll share just a short presentation on the regional walkability plan. And I also wanted to discuss inaccessible sidewalks in construction zones. This is a barrier that's come up during plan outreach, and I'm hoping to get your help in addressing this issue. So first, just a quick recap of what this plan's all about and its goals. The plan really aims to make short trips easier. This was also identified as a gap through the onboard mobility plan, and short trips can include things like that first and last mile to transit. Second, the plan is really important for improving community health, working towards integrating walking and physical activity into daily life. Additionally, walkability really supports transportation equity. So we know that across the region, about 28% of our population has no or limited access to a car. And so these kinds of pedestrian improvements also will help people of different abilities, older adults, as well as youth who don't drive. So the plan also seeks to improve pedestrian comfort and safety, really working towards reducing the number of pedestrian crashes. And lastly, we hope that it will really serve as a blueprint for a connected and accessible network of sidewalks and other pedestrian infrastructure without gaps. So where are we in the process? Next slide, please, Reagan. Thank you. So we started planning in the fall of 2020 and will go through the end of this calendar year. We started off with data collection, really learning about past plans, current efforts, and what those future needs are. And right now, we're really in steps 2 and 3, really honing in on what that regional vision and goals are for walkability, and then also identifying those priority pedestrian zones. So where are those locations where people who are walking and rolling that could be prioritized in street design? So this phase will also include identifying a pedestrian network and developing new street typologies. So the regional walkability plan will also include strategy development, like suggested actions and policies needed to improve walkability. And then working with local agencies, it'll also include an action plan. We hope to be able to integrate recommendations right away into upcoming roadway projects. So this plan, oh, next slide, Reagan. Thank you. So it's really been front-loaded with community engagement. Our efforts over the last about 4 or so months have included an online survey and map that's included about 500 surveys that were completed, plus 200 online map comments. We had an online community virtual meeting, and then we are also working on a series of virtual walk audits. So that included an overall training, followed by 6 audits at locations across the region. And we had about 140 people sign up for those, with the last one being held tonight in the city of Mesquite. So this outreach also, I should mention, includes guidance from a technical advisory committee and citizens advisory committee, and this committee includes a few of those members here today. So next slide. So during this outreach, we've heard multiple times that people using mobility devices have difficulty in traveling in construction zones. So one person described having to turn around in the middle of a block to end a trip without any advance warning, alternative crossings, or other accessible paths of travel to really navigate through. We also know that these closed sidewalks may not always meet ADA requirements. The photo that you see here was taken about 2 weeks ago when I was preparing this slide deck. And this was, I took just about a 15-minute driving trip and came across 2 instances of roadway construction projects with closed sidewalks. So instead of waiting until the plan is completed to implement, we really thought we would, come to you today to help resolve this issue more quickly. We've checked in with Streets and Highways, who suggested that perhaps there could be changes to policies and procedures or specifications, bidding documents, or other elements to address this issue. And so during our time together through this discussion period, I'm interested in really learning about what factors you see that might result in closed sidewalks in construction zones, identify some potential solutions, and then determine next steps. So this concludes my presentation. I really appreciate your time and look forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas on this topic.
All right, thank you, Ms. Reardon. We appreciate the presentation, and I will open it up to the committee for any comments or suggestions or recommendations or things that you've looked at in your agency that that you wanted to share with the group.
Yes, this is Jimmy Benoit with Clark County Public Works. So in our capital projects, we try to address pedestrian access through our special provisions. So as an example, on one of my past projects, we have the statement, pedestrian access shall be maintained along the project roadways at all times. During construction of facilities that require sidewalk removal or asphalt walkway removal, the contractor shall establish temporary walkways adjacent to or across construction activities that are in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 and are such that normal pedestrian traffic is not impeded or endangered by vehicular traffic or the construction. So we do attempt to make allowances during our construction for pedestrians of all types. So I'm not sure how some of these things do happen out in the field. Best thing I could think of is that when something like this happens, it gets reported to the proper agency so that steps can be taken to remedy the situation.
Okay, thanks, Jimmy. And in Clark County, would that be the Fix It Clark County?
Yeah, there's the C-Click Fix, what we just rolled out a few months back, and the In the Works email also works. That's an avenue.
Okay.
Yeah, so we do try to make allowances for pedestrians whenever there's construction going on. But we need to be informed if the contractor does something that he's not supposed to be doing, so that we can take steps to to alleviate the situation, remedy it.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Jimmy. Any other agency, Henderson or North Las Vegas, Boulder City, any additional comments you guys would like to make?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim Keene with Boulder City. I'd like to mimic what Jimmy said. We have similar language in our CIP projects as well, and we even on our temporary traffic control permits for any permitted work. But one of the problems we seem to be running into here quite a bit lately is unpermitted work, people doing stuff without asking for permission, and whether they set up the proper traffic control or a bar stool with a sign that says don't walk here, kind of thing. So we address those as they come in. Same thing, Deb, we have a C-Click Fix here as well on our website.
Okay.
Or they can just call into engineering and let us know, and we'll go take care of it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
I'll go ahead and speak for the city of Las Vegas, Joe Norby for the record. I think from a CIP standpoint, I think regionally, I think a lot of our technical specifications or supplemental technical specifications include the provisions and the importance of pedestrian safety throughout the work zones, accessible pedestrian paths. Where I think I see our bigger struggle is I echo that of Boulder City. Unpermitted work is always an issue for everybody, whether it's accessibility or not. But I'd take it probably a step further. A lot of our small developer contribution projects that go on, they're set up for a day, they're set up for a morning, they come in, do their work, and leave. Sometimes it's even before our inspectors, our traffic control inspectors, can get out there to even verify that things are set up to code or set up to standard. I think that's probably where at least I've noticed our bigger hurdle is getting that out there. One of our internal discussions that we had that we're kind of vetting through and hasn't quite come to fruition yet, but we're hoping we'll see where it goes, is working with our building and safety group to get their inspectors, who do more of the private development utility inspection work, to get them certified in traffic control inspection, get them up to par, gets us an extra set of eyes, gets somebody that's actually going to be at the site because they've got to inspect it anyways, and getting them up to speed so that they can in turn help educate contractors and developers as they come through the process, and making sure that we can kind of get that message out there a little bit further.
Yeah, good idea. Thank you. Yeah, one of the examples, actually, that picture I shared was a private development that was happening. So.
Any additional comments from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, John Penuelos again with the RTC.
Go ahead, JP.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for that, Deb. And, you know, that's one of those problems that is ever present, and it's a very tough nut to crack. I know that all the agencies, you know, the permitting processes and the contract documents and the CIP have, you know, language that, you know, try to set the stage for these types of things to not happen. And that's good, but I just believe strongly that we can do better as professionals, as people that are in charge of the conditions of access to the public rights of way. And, you know, we are just so car focused that it's really difficult, because these are not simple issues. You got to cut in a driveway, you're going to have to block the sidewalk. And you know, I know all the agencies have language that says, you know, you got to put up a detour and, you know, inform the pedestrian to cross here, because we might not see it right now, but sometime down the path, you're going to run into a sidewalk outage. Well, you know, that's all well and good, and that might meet the intent and letter of the law. But if the place the person wants to go is on the far side of that sidewalk closure, and they've got to go a quarter mile to the next signal to cross and then to come back to where they want to go, that's just not a practical or feasible solution. So, you know, the current ADA requires that whatever level of accessibility is present in the condition before construction starts shall be maintained through construction. So this means, in practice, an ADA accessible ramp off the sidewalk, a ADA accessible route around the construction, sidewalk closure, and then back on the path and on their way, which is exceedingly difficult to do. So I would love to see a group of a subcommittee, or I'm sorry, a working group put together to address this issue with the you know, with the surveys that you have and the outreach that you've conducted and the feedback that you have from real users. I think having you in that working group, that would just be extremely valuable. And I think we have to go beyond, you know, CYA, just to be blunt, and really look at what it's going to take. It's going to increase the cost of projects. It's going to require prior planning. It's going to stretch our imaginations, but this is a huge problem. And we just have to do better. So that's my soapbox. So would you be willing, Deb, to sit into a working group like this so we can really dig into what conditions do exist, what challenges the agencies really have, and, you know, really noodle on this thing?
Yes, of course.
That would be great. And we didn't hear from North Las Vegas or Henderson in that discussion. Could you guys just talk just real briefly on what things you have in place in your codes and in your permit application processes, the conditions of approval that address this issue? Because I know you have them. I think it would be beneficial if you could get it on the record on how you folks approach this issue.
Mr. Chairman, go first. What's that?
Go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, this is Eric Hawkins from City of Henderson. Yeah, as JP indicated, Henderson certainly does have those conditions and other things in place, and our reviewers, our inspectors who review the plans are always aware of not just pedestrian issues, but bicycle too. And in fact, the lane occupancy charges include bike lanes. So I think we've at least covered it from that standpoint. I don't think sidewalk is, but that would be nice to be able to do that. But I think that's another conversation. I'm interested as well as you, JP, in a working group. But I wonder, and maybe this is not allowed, but I wonder if it would be a good idea to get the barricade companies and contractors, a sample size from that group involved in the discussion to see their side and challenges they would see or envision. So
I don't think that's any problem at all. If we had if it required a quorum of the committee, then the meeting could be publicly noticed. Joe Damiani with his spec committee is doing a similar thing as they are reviewing the standards and drawings. But yeah, we could invite anybody we wanted to. If we didn't have a quorum and it just wanted to be a subset, a working group, then that's obviously simpler. Sometimes people are a little more free to talk and kick around ideas on the record. So the answer to your question is, yeah, we could absolutely can and should have industry representation in the working group. And I guess the purpose of the working group would be to address this issue, a review of the current policies and conditions that the agencies have to address the issue. That's probably number one. Where are we? Number two, review of the precise law of the land and the ADA requirements to see to where our policy lines up with existing law, and then sit down with industry and consider what has to happen from their perspective to help them help us provide a safe and accessible environment for all people that are not in cars. Like you said, good point bringing up the bikes. That's just as critical. So not an easy thing to tackle, but something that I think we could definitely work on with some open communication. Tim, did you want to talk about North Las Vegas's policies on the issue?
We're pretty similar to everybody else, and we have the same requirements. And like was said before, our biggest problem is unpermitted work and contractors that might do work that's expanded from what they actually applied for, impacting sidewalks and bicycle lanes when they said they weren't going to, that kind of thing. But yeah, getting industry buy-in would help a lot, I think.
JP, can I ask a question?
Well, it's fine by me, but that would be up to the chairman.
I don't know. Sorry, I'm not sure who's leading. Hang on.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Eric.
Thanks. I wondered, as part of the the permitting process, are they required to submit like an accessible path of travel routing plan or anything like that?
I'll open that up for the agencies to respond based on their current knowledge of their permitting process.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this is Eric Hawkins from the City of Henderson. I think it's going to be easier to answer that question on a larger scale. And what I mean by that is, say, for instance, closing of a larger trail. If some work required that, then we absolutely need some kind of a detour plan, you know, signage and all that, even advance, you know, a week or more in advance of the closure. It's not as clear cut, I guess, with a smaller closure, let's say. I think it's still pretty standard to, not pretty standard, it's still standard to require those detour signs at those smaller types of locations. But we do work more with contractors and barricade companies when it comes to those bigger closures.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional comments, other agencies on that question?
Hi, this is Michelle Castro with NDOT. For NDOT, we don't typically require it with an encroachment permit. However, we will require it in our traffic control plan review, which we do after we've approved an encroachment permit. But they still need to have that temporary traffic control plan approved before they can begin construction. Also, we have tried to partner quite a few times lately with City of Las Vegas. We have incorporated these requirements with their project management team prior to their projects going out to bid, because we found a lot of the times that the expense of putting up, you know, a large amount of rail to create these temporary ped paths really changed the budget for the contractors that are bidding on the project. So they have started to incorporate our traffic control plan requirements with their projects, and I think it's helped everything go more smoothly.
Thank you, Michelle. Any additional comments?
This is Jim with Boulder City. Yeah, we require them to submit a traffic control plan for their work, and in particular, if they are indicating that they're closing a sidewalk, to show us a detour plan. And we do have our inspector goes out and checks it, and unfortunately, many times he finds out that they set up half of it instead of all of it, you know, and close the sidewalk, but didn't set up the detour, and then he has to make them set up the detour. But then there's also times when, you know, they show, okay, we're going to keep half the sidewalk open, and they'll have at least 48 inches clear, and we go out and find out they've set it up and there's 24 inches clear, same kind of thing. So a lot of it is chasing them down and make sure they're doing what they're telling us they're going to do correctly. So that can be a tough item for all of us, I'm sure, even when they do pull a permit.
Thank you, Jim. I'd say, echo for the City of Las Vegas, we require a statement of work and it be part of their traffic control plan in the event that they're going to close access to the sidewalk. Probably similar to the other agencies, it's, you know, how truthful are they versus what they're actually doing versus what they said they were going to do. But it is definitely something our barricade inspectors will go out and investigate as well and verify it. And talking with our barricade team last week on some other issues, you know, I was pleasantly surprised to hear and about their willingness once a week to walk the Las Vegas Boulevard project, or chunks of the Las Vegas Boulevard project that is under construction now, to verify that pedestrian detours are set up correctly and working. That's a huge lift on a 2-mile project or more. That for them to take the time to do that, it speaks a lot to the importance of it, and I commend my team for taking that on and ensuring that those setups are being done correctly. And it's easy to look back and say, yeah, your highest priority project in the city gets all the attention, and it's the hope that every project gets the same amount of attention moving forward. Ms. Reardon, did you have any other questions for the team while you're here?
No, this has been just really helpful. I really appreciate your time and kind of helping to think this through and willingness to continue to work on this topic. So thank you.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your time. And pause just one more second. Any additional comments from the committee before we move on?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, John Penuelos again. I think I heard Eric say specifically that he, liked the idea of getting a working group together, and I can gather from the discussion that I don't think there are any objections to that. Gina, do you think would a direction from the committee to work out the details of establishing this working group be appropriate, or do you think that you've got enough direction just from the discussion to move in that direction? Or, Mr. Chairman, maybe that question is directed at you as well. How do we move forward with getting this going?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, this is Joe Damiani with the RTC.
Go ahead, Joe.
This item appears to be just a presentation with no possible action. So therefore, under topics of interest, if that is the desire, then somebody would make it and say under topics of interest, we would like to have staff bring an item to create a working group if that's what is so desired.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. So with that, let's close out this item, and we can bring it back up here towards the end of the meeting, and we will move on to item number 6. In interest of time, keep this thing going forward. Ms. Kendall.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so item 6 is to receive a presentation from Gruber Power Services on the uninterruptible power system. Justin Brownlow from Gruber Power Services is here to present.
Hey everybody, it's Justin. I also have Nicole on here with me. She's one of my team members, and in the interest of time, I am going to keep this very brief and try to tailor it specifically to your guys' needs. So again, Justin Brownlow with Gruber Power Services. Next slide, please. We've been in business since 1984, so for 37 years. As it says there, we do not just UPS service and general maintenance and battery replacements. We also do installations, deinstallations, moves, any type of reconfigurations you need on new and refurbished equipment. We service all brands and manufacturers, all different sizes, anything from your small little plug-and-play units that are under your desk into 1 megawatt units that back up full facilities, data centers, all kinds of different applications. Next slide, please. Just some highlights on the company. We have field engineers around the U.S., but where it's more tailored to you guys is we do have 1 field engineer in Las Vegas, 1 field engineer in Henderson. In the unlikely event that both of those guys are tied up, we do have 4 field engineers in Phoenix and a field engineer in Los Angeles, just to give you guys a rough idea of where we're located around your area. We do have, as I said earlier, refurbished units here on site. In the event one of yours goes down and we need something temporary, we have them here. We can get them out to you relatively quickly. We also do have a very large parts warehouse. So for some of the older equipment that's out there as things fail, we normally do have the spare parts here on site that we can get those back up and running. Down there towards the bottom, you see where we support end-of-life equipment. Generally with the manufacturers, you'll see at the 10 to 12 year mark, they'll start considering the equipment end-of-life, and they will either no longer offer services for it, or they will charge a premium for said services. We do not choose to do that. Next slide, please. This is just a general idea of the different type of service levels we have. Platinum plan, that's 24/7, 365. That plan includes 2 p.m. visits per year, 24/7 emergency response. If you call in, something's wrong with your unit, we'll try to troubleshoot it over the phone. If we can't, we dispatch. We come out, we figure out what's wrong with the unit. Those parts would then be replaced under the service agreement. All of those are covered under the agreement at no additional cost. There is different tiers within that plan where you can include batteries or you can include capacitors. Same thing is true for the gold plan. That is just a 5x8 instead of a 24/7. Then we also have a silver plan, which is basically kind of standby. We'll come out as needed on predetermined time and material rates. No parts are covered. Those are the 3 main full service plans we have. Next slide, please. That kind of goes into the service calls that I just spoke about. We do have free tech support hotline, whether you're under contract or not. You can call into that and we can try to help troubleshoot the unit for you over the phone, give you an idea of what may need to be fixed. That is 24/7, again, whether you're under contract or not. Next slide, please. We do have depot repair services here on site. So for instance, if you have some units that are considered modular, that have power modules that are hot swappable that you can pull in and out at the user level, if you have an issue with that, you can send them into us. We generally can repair them here on site and send them back out to you. Also on some of the smaller units, if you want to send them in for repair, we can do that as well. A lot of the times, though, to be honest with you, on the smaller units, 9 times out of 10, it's the batteries. You replace the batteries. If that doesn't fix the problem, generally it's cheaper to replace the unit than repair the unit. You don't want to put a $1,000 board in a 15-year-old unit when you can buy a brand new unit for $1,500. General lifespan of a unit is 12 years. But we can go into that another time into greater detail if this is something anybody is interested in. Next slide, please. We also do offer a small unit replacement program. The prices down there are just kind of an idea. What this does basically is if anything goes wrong with the unit during the contracted period, we will send you a full replacement unit, and that would be covered underneath the agreement as well. We also have plans where every 2 to 3 years, generally that's when you need to replace the batteries, we can either send you a replacement battery pack or send you a completely new unit. You send us back the old one, we'll recondition it, refurbish it, pull the batteries out, and get a new one ready, and we can cycle that through your guys' inventory, or it can be used for other customers that are on the program as well. Next slide, please. Obviously, these are the brands that we both sell and service. Obviously, the big ones out there are APC, Eaton, Vertiv. MGE is now under APC for 3-phase and Eaton for single-phase. Eaton just also procured Triplite. Let's see, I think Chloride's up there as well. Chloride is now underneath the Vertiv. Best Power is also under Eaton. But pretty much any brand that you need, we are authorized resellers of all of those brands, so we can get you any one you need. We have no bias. Whatever the customer wants, we'll get them. If you come to me with a situation of, hey, I'd like this unit, do you have an alternative? I'll give my honest opinion and let you guys make your decision, you know, based on what those needs are. Next slide, please. These are some of our this is a little bit needs to be updated, but shows where we have our field engineer presence. Again, where it more relates to you guys is we do have the 2 field engineers that are locally, then our ones in Vegas and Los Angeles. In the event that the 2 engineers in your area are tied up on a call or, you know, dispatched, say somewhere up in northern Nevada, if we have a contract call out in Reno and they're up there doing that, we would dispatch another engineer. to your guys' site to get you guys taken care of if you were under contract with us. And with that, I believe that is the last slide. As I said, I was going to try to keep it very short and sweet. And if you guys have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
All right, Chair Norby, for the record, Justin, we appreciate your presentation. I'll open it up to the committee for any questions that they may have. All right, I don't hear any questions. We will appreciate your time, Justin. Appreciate you sticking around. We will, in effort to keep the meeting moving here, we'll move on to item number 7, Ms. Kendall.
Thank you, Joe. Item 7 is to review the capital improvement program as it relates to the freeway and arterial systems of transportation, FAST, our arterial management system, AMS, operations budget, and project requests for fiscal years 2022 through 2031. Teresa Gazer is here today to provide more information on our CIP projects for this fiscal year. Go ahead, Teresa.
Thank you, Ms. Kendall. Teresa Gazer, Director of FAST for the record. I would like to draw everybody's attention to the item that was listed in the backup. It is the CIP list put together by FAST. It identifies specific projects that FAST believes has a regional transportation impact and would benefit from these improvements. As I said, the list is attached. I can go through them, or I can address any questions that the committee has regarding these items.
Teresa, this is Joe Norby for the record. Why don't you just give a high level, if you could, maybe just a quick, I don't think there are that many line items on there, just kind of a brief synopsis, if you could, of the line items you're requesting, then we'll open it up for comments.
Excellent, sounds good. Thank you, Joe. Again, this is Teresa Gazer for the record. So I'll go through just a list of new projects that have been identified, and this is in the next 5-year forecast. We are looking at a review of the current traffic signal system, including all of the software and hardware components out in the field, which includes the controllers at the cabinets. Various ITS data analytics, smaller projects, GPS traffic signal preemption project, the project referred to as B2G, now software, which allows for tracking of contractors and subcontractors for small businesses and DBE participation. Adaptive traffic signal corridor projects, we're looking to expand that process out to maybe include additional corridors in the Southern Nevada area. The ITS infrastructure master plan, I believe we've referred to this in previous meetings. This is to both inventory all the existing fiber optic in Southern Nevada, as well as moving forward and developing a master plan to address gaps and redundancy and expansion of the network. Regional traffic signal detection, repair, and replacement, so that can be evaluated on a regional level to determine how to best address this and have the best performance for signal operations at signalized intersections. ITS infrastructure security, this is to explore opportunities to improve security of the network and options that are available for securing field devices. Battery power backups, we just heard about UPS, as well as cooling requirements for HVAC or AC units at the hubs. Cameras at all signalized intersections. Pedestrian safety passive detection to run a pilot project for that one. I think that was similar to what we were listening to from Boulder AI for touchless pedestrian detection. The ATC MTD grant on the US 95 Integrated Safety Technology Corridor. and transit signal priority to do another pilot project. So those are the new projects that we've identified, as well as the funding matches for the next 5 years. And with that, again, I will reopen it up to the committee for any specific questions.
All right, thank you, Teresa. I appreciate that. Any questions or comments for Teresa from the committee? All right, Teresa, looks like you get off pretty easy. I'm not hearing any, and I don't believe we have any vote or anything on this one, so we will move on to the next item. Ms. Kendall.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, that was, doesn't look like we do need a vote on that one, so you're right. All right, number 8, item 8 is to discuss work zone and temporary traffic control related items that we've been talking a lot about, actually. I have included in the agenda the Seen Orange report. It's in your backup. Looks like all the items have been addressed, and there's just a couple that are lingering that we're still trying to close that should be closed here very soon. Other than that, I don't have any other issues to talk about myself, right now. But we do have Teresa here and other staff members here. If they have any issues, they can bring those up now. If not, I'm here to answer any questions that the subcommittee might have.
Any questions? Joe Norby for the record, Chair. Just wanted to double check. Are there any questions for Ms. Kendall regarding the Seeing Orange report as presented in the full agenda? All right, I'm hearing none. So we will move on to item number 9. Ms. Kendall.
All right, great. Thank you, Joe. Item 9 is to discuss and resolve various transit systems, traffic engineering operation, and or law enforcement issues. We have staff from transit here, and I don't have any issues to address at this moment, but I'm here to answer any questions or allow transit folks to talk if they have any issues, or law enforcement.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kendall. Joe Norby for the record, wanted to open it up for any questions or comments or issues that the committee feels they want to share at this time related to item number 9. All right, hearing none, let it go on, Ms. Kendall, to item number 10.
All right, great. Item 10 is to discuss topics of interest. This is an opportunity for the subcommittee members to share updates or information with the other members.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kendall. Joe Norby for the record. We will open it up for comments from the committee.
Yeah, this is JP again, or John Pinuelos, I'm sorry, with the RTC. Joe's suggestion, Joe Damiani's suggestion of using this item as a spot to have staff start working on putting together that working group to address that access issues in work zones. I think that's a good idea, and I think that fits in this area here. We can't act on anything today, but we can, look forward with a working group and then report back at the next meeting, exactly how we're going to tackle that. Is that something you could entertain, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I was waiting to see if somebody else would have something else before I brought that one up, but absolutely, and I guess, forgive my level of expertise in this matter, is it just a recommendation from the committee to RTC to explore the incorporation or the development of a small working group to meet to discuss ADA related issues related to work zones?
Yeah, that's how it's been done in the past. In my experience, what do you think, Gina? Is that clear enough for you guys?
I think so. I think it's directed by the chair to establish a working group. I would just like clarification on the goal of that working group so that we can address that specifically and make it, have some results in mind, I guess, is what I'm looking for. So I can put a working group together if that's what I'm directed to do.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful. I think the direction to staff is to come back to the committee with the potential. I mean, with the goals that the working group would, because the committee cannot direct staff to do a particular thing with this item. They can tell staff to go work on it and come back for an approval item that's agendized, so everybody knows that we're going to have a discussion on this particular topic. So I think it's just it's simple as go talk it over, come back with the committee with a recommendation. So any discussion of goals, outcomes, membership, all those things would have to be handled with a specific item so the public knows that that's going to be discussed. This is just to get us started. That's my recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, JP, and thank you, Gina, for that. Any additional comments from the committee on this subject before we, I guess, ask the RTC staff to do this?
Yeah, I think the simplest way to put it, Joe, would be just to direct staff to bring back an item to establish a working group to address the ADA issues discussed at this meeting.
Okay, so I guess unless there's any additional comments from the subcommittee members, we will ask the RTC staff to explore this further and bring this back at our next regularly scheduled meeting. And by this, I mean ADA, as it relates to ADA incorporation to traffic control, barricade permitting, and requirements.
I think that's clear. We can work with that.
Okay.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll figure that out. That sounds good.
Any additional topics of interest to be brought before the committee at this time?
I had one, Mr. Chair, real quick. To state the obvious, we had a lot of presentations today. I mentioned at our last meeting that this was the new model that we wanted to address. We'll be mindful in the future of the length of the presentations and the other agenda items in it to not overwhelm you with a 2-hour meeting. But the idea is that we want all the vendors, when they come to us with a great product that we want to look at, if they go to you as individual agencies, we want to direct everybody to this committee so they can come in, give everyone the same information at the same time. We can then know what everybody's working on, and then break off into sidebars with those agencies that are interested in particular aspects of what the vendor has to offer. So that's the new model. Yes, it's going to make these meetings longer, but we're hoping that it's an investment in time, and it will keep us from maybe going down paths that are maybe not necessarily working at cross purposes, but at least, if two agencies are looking at the same thing, maybe we can consolidate and have the vendor come back and talk to those specific agencies rather than going off on potentially diverging paths. So we appreciate the committee's indulgence. We're going to try to minimize the number of presentations, but we would really appreciate the effort if we could bring everybody into this committee as a starting point, and then from there break off as the agencies and as the RTC sees fit. So thank you for that.
Thank you, JP. Appreciate it. The presentations today were very well done. We appreciate those vendors and RTC staff members for their time and willingness to come speak today, and appreciate the information. I think it's a good way to at least introduce some stuff that you know, who knows what the discussion may come in each of our roles and responsibilities where you know, it sparks oh yeah, I remember when ... that presentation was made. So
Exactly.
appreciate the RTC staff and coordinating those for us to hear today. All right, any additional topics of discussion at this time?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim with Boulder City.
Go ahead, Jim.
Just had a question for probably RTC, I guess. Any ideas when we may or may not be going back to in-person meetings?
Hopefully soon. It'd be a lot easier. I don't. JP, do you have any ideas?
Well, we're going to be, the RTC is going to be back full-time in the office starting June 1st. So month of May has been kind of our transition period. So I suspect that we're going to be have in-person meetings June 1 on. Reagan, have you heard anything from your side of the house on when we're going to go back to in-person?
Hi, John. This is Reagan Lively for the record. Yes, we have been instructed that in-person meetings will resume as of June 1st, 2021.
Great, thank you for that. And you know, we've got all these great multimedia skills and abilities to communicate. So the committee will meet in person, but that does not necessarily mean that the vendors and the presentations will have to be done in person. We can leverage you know, the technology that we are now very familiar with to make it an efficient use of people's time, and you know, not necessarily drag people into a conference room without you know, good reason. So the committee will meet in person and take it from there.
JP, I apologize for interrupting. This is Reagan Lively again for the record. Just want to note that once we do go to in-person, it will be in person. We will not have a virtual aspect with the WebEx or call-in.
Right. I didn't think that meant that a vendor would necessarily have to physically be in the building. We're not going to stream it. I understand that. So anyway, more to come on that. We won't take up the committee's time on that. We'll get to the bottom of it. In-person meetings June 1, and we'll work out the details and let you know from there.
Thank you, JP.
Good question, Jim. Appreciate that, and appreciate RTC staff for that clarification. Any additional items of topics of interest at this time? All right, hearing none. Ms. Kendall, let's move on to item number 11.
Oh, great. Thank you. This is our last item. This is the second time set aside for public comment. Just a reminder that comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining words to be included in the written record. Do we have any comments?
Thank you, Ms. Kendall. Reagan Lively again for the record. There are no public comments at this time.
All right. Thank you, Reagan, and thank you, Ms. Kendall. If there are no additional comments, we will go ahead and move to adjourn this meeting. We appreciate everyone's attendance and participation today. And the meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.